the museums, the established routines, but not as much as I expected. There's a freedom here that I never had there, room to breathe, to begin again. Luke nodded, understanding in his eyes. That's what drew me west too, the space to become someone new. And have you? Hannah asked softly. Become someone new? Luke's gaze was contemplative as he looked out over the darkening prairie. In some ways. In others, I'm still the same man who rode away from Virginia a decade ago, still carrying the same regrets, the same memories. Your wife and son, Hannah said gently. You must have loved them very much. I did, Luke confirmed, his voice low. Caroline was my childhood sweetheart. We married just before the war. James was born while I was fighting at Gettysburg. I didn't see him until he was nearly a year old. Pain flashed across his features. He was only 4 when the fever took them both. Some days I can barely remember their faces. Other days the loss feels as fresh as if it happened yesterday. Hannah's heart ached for him. Time doesn't heal all wounds, not completely, but it does teach us how to carry them. Luke turned to her, his expression softening. You understand that better than most, I think. In different ways, Hannah acknowledged. James and I. Our marriage wasn't what either of us hoped for by the end. His death brought grief, yes, but also relief from watching his slow self-destruction. The hardest part was seeing the children lose their father bit by bit, long before he actually died. Luke's hand found hers in the gathering darkness, his touch warm and reassuring. You've done right by them, Hannah. They're remarkable children, happy, confident, kind. That's your doing. Not entirely, Hannah said, her voice thick with emotion. These past weeks, seeing them with you, Thomas especially needs a man he can look up to. You've given him that, even in such a short time. The words hung between them, laden with significance neither was quite ready to address directly. Luke's fingers tightened around hers. Hannah, the cottage door opened as Sarah appeared, interrupting whatever Luke had been about to say. Emma wants you to read her story, Mama. She says she can't sleep without it. Hannah reluctantly withdrew her hand from Luke's, aware of Sarah's observant gaze flickering between them. Tell her I'll be right there, sweetheart. As Sarah disappeared back inside, Luke stood, reaching for his hat. I should go. Let you tend to your family. Hannah rose as well, suddenly reluctant to end the evening. Saturday, then. For the apple trees, Luke nodded, his eyes holding hers in the dim light from the cottage windows. Saturday. He hesitated, then in a gesture that seemed almost impulsive, he took her hand and raised it briefly to his lips, a touch so light it might have been imagined, yet it sent a current of warmth through Hannah's entire body. Good night, Hannah. As she watched him ride away, Hannah acknowledged the truth she'd been avoiding. She was falling in love with Lucas Remington. The realization was both exhilarating and terrifying. She hadn't come west seeking romance. Her focus had been security for her children, a fresh start far from the painful memories of Philadelphia. Yet here, against all expectations, she'd found a man whose quiet strength and gentle heart called to something deep within her own. Oh, James, she whispered to the stars, addressing her late husband's memory. I never expected this. I hope you'd understand. With a deep breath, Hannah turned and went inside to read Emma her bedtime story, pushing thoughts of Luke and their growing connection to the back of her mind. Saturday would come soon enough. Saturday dawned clear and mild, a perfect early September day for planting. Hannah woke with the sun, her anticipation for Luke's visit making her restless. She channeled her energy into baking fresh bread and preparing a stew that could simmer all day while they worked in the garden. The children, sensing her mood, were unusually helpful with their morning chores. Luke arrived mid-morning, his wagon loaded with not just tools for planting the apple saplings, but additional supplies for extending the garden plot, fencing materials, more seedlings for fall vegetables, and several rose bushes. The roses are from Mrs. Flores, he explained as he unloaded them carefully. She said every home needs flowers, not just vegetables. Hannah touched the delicate plants with appreciation. She's right. Please thank her for me. The day unfolded in pleasant, productive work. Luke showed the children how to prepare the soil for the apple saplings, explaining the importance of proper spacing and sunlight. Thomas absorbed every word, mimicking Luke's actions with serious concentration, while Emma and Sarah helped Hannah plant the rose bushes along the cottage south wall. By mid-afternoon, the expanded garden was taking shape, apple trees in a neat row where they would eventually provide shade as well as fruit, vegetables in well-ordered beds, and the roses adding a touch of beauty to the practical space. As they worked, Luke shared stories of his own childhood in Virginia, where his family had kept an orchard that supplied apples to markets as far away as Richmond. My father could tell which variety of apple a tree would produce just by the shape of its leaves, he recalled, helping Thomas pat soil around the base of a sapling. He tried to teach me, but I never quite got the knack of it. What happened to your family's orchard? Sarah asked, always curious about Luke's past. A shadow crossed his face. Lost during the war. Union troops burned it when they came through in '64. My father didn't live to see it. He died at Antietam, fighting for the Confederacy. Hannah, working nearby, glanced up with surprise. You fought for the Union, though. Luke nodded, his expression complex. My father believed in the Southern cause. I couldn't. When the war came, I crossed the lines and enlisted with the Union. My father never forgave me. The last letter I had from him called me a traitor to family and homeland. The pain in his voice was still fresh, decades later. Hannah moved closer, touching his arm gently. You followed your conscience. There's no higher loyalty. Luke covered her hand with his own, gratitude in his eyes for her understanding. The moment was intimate, despite the presence of the children, a silent acknowledgement of the deepening bond between them. As the day progressed, other townspeople stopped by, first Sheriff Douglas and his wife, bringing a freshly baked pie to christen the new garden. Then several families whose children attended the school, curious to see what the new teacher was creating. By late afternoon, the planned gardening day had evolved into an impromptu gathering, with neighbors contributing food and conversation. Hannah watched in amazement as her simple homestead became a center of community activity. This was something she'd never experienced in Philadelphia, where neighbors often lived side by side for years without truly knowing one another. Here, barely 3 weeks after her arrival, she was already woven into the fabric of Council Bluffs society. As twilight approached and the visitors began to depart, Hannah found Luke standing by the newly planted apple trees, his expression contemplative in the fading light. "Penny for your thoughts," she said softly, joining him. Luke smiled, though his eyes remained serious. Just thinking about how quickly things can change. 3 weeks ago, this was an abandoned property with a leaking roof and raccoons in the bell tower. Now it's a home, a school, a garden, a future. 3 weeks ago, I was terrified I'd made a terrible mistake bringing my children so far west, Hannah admitted. Now I can't imagine being anywhere else. Luke turned to face her fully, his eyes intent on hers. Hannah, there's something I need to say to you. Something I've been trying to find the right moment for. Hannah's heart quickened at his serious tone. Yes. Before Luke could continue, a rider appeared at the edge of the property, approaching at speed. Luke's posture immediately tensed, his hand moving instinctively toward the gun he wasn't currently wearing. He'd left his gun belt in the wagon out of respect for the school setting. The rider proved to be Miguel, his young face tight with urgency as he reined his horse to a stop before them. "Luke, Mr. Reeves sent me to find you," he said breathlessly. "Blackwell's gang hit the north pasture. They've taken at least 20 head, maybe more. Wounded 2 of our men who tried to stop them." Luke's expression hardened. "How long ago?" 2 hours. "Mr. Reeves has gathered the hands. They're waiting for you before riding out." Luke nodded grimly, already moving toward his wagon. "Tell them I'll be there within the hour." Miguel wheeled his horse around and galloped away, leaving a heavy silence in his wake. Hannah followed Luke to the wagon, fear tightening her chest. "You're going after them." After Blackwell's gang, Luke retrieved his gun belt, buckling it efficiently around his waist. "Have to. Those cattle represent the livelihood of everyone at the Double R, and if Blackwell gets away with it this time, he'll only get bolder." "But you said yourself they're dangerous men," Hannah protested, her voice tight with concern. "Surely the Sheriff Douglas will be notified," Luke assured her, checking his revolver before holstering it. "But by the time he gathers a posse, the trail will be cold. We need to move now." Hannah's children had gathered nearby, sensing the sudden tension. Thomas stepped forward, his young face serious. "Are you going to catch bad men, Mr. Remington?" Luke knelt to the boy's level, his expression gentling. "That's right, Thomas, just like the stories in your dime novels. But real life isn't like those stories. The good guys don't always win without getting hurt." "You'll be careful, though?" Thomas asked anxiously. "As careful as I can be," Luke promised, ruffling the boy's hair before rising to his feet. Hannah's fear must have shown on her face, for Luke took her hands in his voice low and intense. "I'll come back, Hannah. You have my word." "See that you do," she whispered, fighting the urge to beg him to stay. This was his duty, his responsibility to the ranch that had given him a home. She had no right to interfere, no matter how strong her feelings had grown. Luke hesitated, then pulled her gently toward him and pressed a brief, tender kiss to her forehead. "Wait for me," he murmured, his breath warm against her skin. Before Hannah could respond, he was mounting his horse, gathering the reins with practiced efficiency. With a final nod to the family, he turned and rode away, his figure silhouetted against the setting sun as he urged his horse to a gallop. Hannah stood watching until he disappeared from view, her children clustered around her in silent support. Only when the dust had settled did she realize she was trembling. "Come, children," she said softly. "Let's finish putting the garden tools away. Then we'll have supper and say a prayer for Mr. Remington and the men of the Double R." As they worked in the gathering darkness, Hannah tried to focus on practical matters, but her mind kept returning to Luke, his warmth, his gentleness with her children, the feel of his lips against her forehead. In just 3 weeks, he had become someone she couldn't imagine her life without. The thought of losing him to Blackwell's gang filled her with a cold dread she could barely contain. "He'll come back, Mama," Sarah said quietly as they washed dishes after supper. "Mr. Remington is smart and brave. He'll be all right." Hannah managed a smile for her perceptive daughter. "Yes, sweetheart, I believe he will." But as she tucked the children into bed and sat alone on the porch in the rocking chair Luke had brought her, Hannah couldn't silence the whisper of fear that wound through her thoughts. The frontier held dangers she was only beginning to understand, and Luke was riding directly into them. All she could do was wait, and hope, and pray for his safe return. 3 days passed without word from Luke or the Double R. Hannah went through the motions of teaching, trying to maintain a cheerful demeanor for her students, but her worry grew with each passing hour. Sheriff Douglas stopped by the school on the second day to inform her that he and several deputies had joined the pursuit of Blackwell's gang, following the trail Luke and the ranch hands had discovered. "No need for concern, Mrs. Kirkwood," he assured her, though his eyes betrayed his own worry. "Luke Remington knows those hills better than most. If anyone can track down Blackwell without getting his men killed, it's him." On the evening of the third day, as Hannah sat on her porch watching the sunset and trying to distract herself with lesson plans, a rider appeared on the horizon. Her heart leapt, then fell as she recognized not Luke's tall figure but Miguel's slighter frame. The young man's expression as he approached sent ice through her veins. "Miguel, what's happened?" she asked, rising to meet him as he dismounted. Miguel removed his hat, his young face solemn. "We found Blackwell's hideout, Mrs. Kirkwood. There was a fight. Luke, he was shot." The world seemed to tilt beneath Hannah's feet. "Is he?" "He's alive," Miguel hastened to assure her, "but badly wounded. We brought him back to the ranch yesterday." "The doctor from Council Bluffs took the bullet out. Luke's asking for you." Relief mingled with renewed fear. "How serious is it?" "Doctor says if infection doesn't set in, he should recover, but he's in a lot of pain and—" Miguel hesitated. "He's not a good patient. Keeps trying to get up, check on things. Mrs. Flores thought maybe if you came, he might actually rest like the doctor ordered." Hannah didn't hesitate. "Let me make arrangements for my children. We'll come with you." Within the hour, Hannah and her children were in Miguel's wagon, heading for the Double R. She'd sent notes to Mayor Wilson explaining her absence from school the next day and to Mrs. Douglas asking her to check on the cottage. The children, understanding the seriousness of the situation, sat quietly beside her, Emma clutching her favorite doll while Thomas and Sarah exchanged worried glances. The Double R Ranch spread across several thousand acres west of Council Bluffs. Its main house, an impressive two-story structure surrounded by barns, bunkhouses, and outbuildings. Despite her anxiety, Hannah couldn't help admiring the well-maintained property as they approached in the last light of day. Mrs. Flores, a motherly Mexican woman with silver-streaked black hair, met them at the door with obvious relief. "Thank God you've come," she said, ushering them inside. "That man is the worst patient I've ever seen. Tried to get out of bed this morning to check the north fence line, if you can believe it, with a bullet hole in his shoulder barely a day old." "Where is he?" Hannah asked, removing her bonnet as she glanced around the well-appointed entrance hall. "In the foreman's cabin behind the main house," Mrs. Flores replied. "Mr. Reeves thought he'd be more comfortable there than in the bunkhouse, with the men coming and going. I've prepared rooms for you and the children here in the main house." "Thank you," Hannah said gratefully. "Could someone stay with my children while I see Luke? I don't want to expose them to seeing him injured until I know how he's doing." "Of course. My daughter Lucia will look after them. There's fresh cookies in the kitchen," she added with a wink to the children, who perked up despite their worry. As the children followed Lucia toward the kitchen, Mrs. Flores led Hannah through the house and out a back door. A small cabin stood about 50 yards away, lamplight glowing in its windows against the gathering dusk. "He's been asking for you since they brought him back," Mrs. Flores said quietly as they walked. "Never seen Luke so affected by anyone before. You must be very special to him." Hannah felt her cheeks warm. "We've become friends." Mrs. Flores's knowing smile suggested she wasn't fooled by Hannah's understatement, but she didn't press the issue. "The doctor removed the bullet clean, but Luke lost a lot of blood. He needs rest more than anything, something he refuses to do. Perhaps you can convince him where the rest of us have failed." At the cabin door, Mrs. Flores paused. "I'll leave you two alone. Call if you need anything." With a deep breath to steady herself, Hannah entered the cabin. It was a simple space, one room with a bed, small table, chairs, and a stone fireplace where a low fire burned. Luke lay on the bed, his upper body propped up with pillows, his left shoulder and chest heavily bandaged. His face was pale beneath his tan, dark stubble shadowing his jaw, but his eyes brightened when he saw her. "Hannah," he said, his voice hoarse but strong. "You came." Hannah moved quickly to his side, fighting the urge to throw her arms around him. "Of course I came, you foolish man. What were you thinking, trying to get out of bed with a bullet wound?" A ghost of his usual smile touched Luke's lips. "There's work to be done. Can't lie around while others pick up my slack." Hannah sat carefully on the edge of the bed, taking his hand in hers. His skin was too warm, a slight fever perhaps, but not the dangerous heat of serious infection. "The work will wait until you're healed. You're no good to anyone if you collapse from pushing yourself too soon." Luke's fingers tightened around hers. "It's good to see you. I'm sorry for worrying you." "What happened?" Hannah asked softly, her free hand moving almost of its own accord to brush a lock of dark hair from his forehead. Luke sighed, leaning back against the pillows. "We tracked Blackwell's gang to an abandoned mining camp in the hills. Thought we had the element of surprise, but they were waiting for us. Got into a firefight. I took a bullet meant for Miguel. Fool boy was in the open, would have hit him square in the chest." Hannah's heart clenched at how close he'd come to death. "And Blackwell got away. Again." Frustration tightened Luke's features. "But we recovered most of the stolen cattle, and the sheriff arrested 2 of Blackwell's men who were wounded in the fight. They'll stand trial in Omaha next month." "So it wasn't for nothing," Hannah said gently. "You protected your ranch, your people." "That matters." Luke's eyes held hers, suddenly intense despite his weakened state. "When that bullet hit me, all I could think about was you, Hannah, that I might not see you again, might not get to tell you." He paused, struggling for words. Hannah's heart hammered in her chest. "Tell me what, Luke?" "That I love you," he said simply, his voice low but clear. "I know it's too soon. We've known each other barely a month, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life." Tears pricked Hannah's eyes as emotion welled within her. "It's not too soon," she whispered. "Not when you feel as I do." Hope flared in Luke's eyes. "And how is that, Hannah Kirkwood?" "That somehow, against all expectations, I've fallen in love with you too," she admitted, the words bringing a lightness to her heart even as tears spilled down her cheeks. "I came west looking for a new beginning for my children. I never imagined finding someone to love again." Luke reached up with his good arm, his hand cradling her cheek with infinite tenderness. "Your children are part of why I love you, Hannah. Your devotion to them, your courage in bringing them here for a better life. They're extraordinary, just like their mother." Hannah leaned into his touch, eyes closing briefly at the warmth of his palm against her skin. "They adore you, you know, especially Thomas. He's barely stopped talking about you since we met." "And I them," Luke said seriously. "But Hannah, I need you to understand something. My life is here at the Double R. It's not just a job, it's my home, my responsibility. Mr. Reeves is getting older, he depends on me to manage things more each year." Hannah nodded, understanding his concern. "The schoolhouse isn't so far. 5 miles is nothing when the heart is involved." Relief washed over Luke's features. "You wouldn't mind living at the ranch instead of in town?" "Mind?" Hannah laughed softly. "Luke, my home is wherever my family is. If that includes the Double R, then so be it." Luke's smile was like sunrise breaking over the prairie. "Does this mean you're considering becoming my family, Hannah Kirkwood?" "I'm considering it very seriously. Lucas Remington," she replied, her own smile mirroring his despite the tears still damp on her cheeks. Luke tugged gently on her hand, drawing her closer. "Then consider this," he murmured, before pressing his lips to hers in a kiss that, despite his weakened state, held all the promise and passion of his declaration. Hannah responded with a depth of feeling that surprised even her. her hand coming to rest lightly on his uninjured shoulder as their lips moved together in perfect harmony. When they finally parted, both breathless, Luke rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since I saw you standing in the dust of Main Street, protecting your children like a mama bear," he confessed. Hannah laughed softly. "Even with 3 children in tow and travel dust on my skirts, especially then," Luke assured her, his eyes warm with affection. "You were the most beautiful, courageous woman I'd ever seen." A knock at the cabin door interrupted the moment. Mrs. Flores entered with a tray of food and fresh bandages, her knowing smile indicating she'd guessed the nature of their conversation. "Dinner for you both," she announced, setting the tray on the bedside table. "And time to change those bandages, Mr. Remington. No arguments." Luke grimaced but didn't protest as Mrs. Flores efficiently checked his wound and applied fresh bandages. Hannah was relieved to see that while the injury was serious, the bullet had passed cleanly through the fleshy part of his shoulder without hitting bone or major blood vessels. "Much better today," Mrs. Flores declared as she finished. "No sign of infection. Keep resting and you might be back on your feet in a week or two." "A week or two," Luke protested. "Mrs. Flores, I can't possibly—" "You can and you will," Hannah interrupted firmly, "or I'll have the children come sit on you to keep you in that bed." Luke's expression was comically indignant, then resigned. "I see I'm outnumbered." "And outmatched," Mrs. Flores added with a wink to Hannah. "I'll leave you to your dinner. The children are enjoying their meal with Lucia and Mr. Reeves in the main house. He's quite taken with them already, especially little Emma." After Mrs. Flores departed, Hannah helped Luke sit up more comfortably and arranged the dinner tray between them. As they shared the simple but delicious meal, they talked of practical matters: Hannah's teaching schedule, the possibility of hiring a substitute for days when weather might make the journey to town difficult, the approaching winter and preparations needed. "There's a small school on the ranch property, actually," Luke mentioned as Hannah cleared away their plates. "It was built for the ranch hands' children and those from neighboring homesteads. Hasn't been used in several years. The last teacher moved away and we couldn't find a replacement. The children go to town now." Hannah's interest was piqued. "A school here. How many children?" "About a dozen at last count. Ages 6 to 15. Mr. Reeves has been concerned about their education suffering, especially in winter when the journey to town can be impossible." "That could be a solution," Hannah mused. "If I could teach here several days a week and in town the others. Though I'd need the town council's approval." "Mr. Reeves has considerable influence with the council," Luke noted. "And they'd surely prefer a partial teaching schedule to losing their teacher entirely." Hannah nodded, ideas already forming. "It could work. I'd need to inspect the ranch school, of course, and there would be details to arrange." Luke chuckled, wincing slightly as the movement jarred his injured shoulder. "Already planning. That's my Hannah. My Hannah." The simple phrase warmed her from within. Someone has to plan, especially with you confined to bed for the foreseeable future. As evening deepened into night, Hannah reluctantly prepared to return to the main house where her children were being settled for sleep. Standing by Luke's bedside, she couldn't resist leaning down to place one more gentle kiss on his lips. "Rest," she ordered softly. "I'll bring the children to see you tomorrow if you're feeling up to visitors." Luke caught her hand as she straightened. "Hannah, thank you for coming, for everything." The emotion in his voice touched her deeply. "Always, Luke. Now get some sleep." As Hannah walked back to the main house under a canopy of stars, her heart felt lighter than it had in years. The future stretching before her, a future with Luke by her side, held promise and joy she had never dared to imagine when boarding that stage coach to Council Bluffs. Whatever challenges lay ahead, They would face them together, with the strength of their newfound love to sustain them. The children, drowsy but determined to wait for their mother's return, greeted her with questions about Luke's condition. Hannah reassured them that he would recover fully, though it would take time and patience. "Can we see him tomorrow?" Thomas asked eagerly. "I want to hear about the gunfight with the outlaws." Hannah smoothed his hair affectionately. "You may, but no pestering him about gunfights. Mr. Remington needs rest, not excitement." As she tucked them into the comfortable beds Mrs. Flores had prepared, Emma asked the question Hannah had been anticipating. "Mama, do you love Mr. Remington, like in the stories where the prince and princess live happily ever after?" Hannah considered how to respond, aware of Sarah's and Thomas's attentive gazes. These children deserved honesty, not evasion. "Yes, Emma, I do love him, very much." "Does that mean he's going to be our new papa?" Thomas asked, his young face serious. Hannah sat on the edge of his bed, choosing her words carefully. "Mr. Remington and I have feelings for each other that are still new. We're getting to know one another, but yes, in time, it's possible he might become part of our family." "I think he already is," Sarah observed quietly. "He looks at you the way Mrs. Douglas's story books say a man should look at the woman he loves, and he treats us like we're important to him, not just extra baggage that comes with you." Hannah was touched by her daughter's perception. "You are important to him. He told me so himself." Emma yawned, snuggling deeper into her covers. "I want him to be our papa. He's nice and strong and makes you smile, Mama." "That he does, little one," Hannah agreed, kissing Emma's forehead. "That he does." In the days that followed, a new routine established itself. Hannah taught at the Council Bluffs School during the day, then traveled to the Double R in the afternoons to visit Luke, whose recovery progressed steadily despite his impatience with the restrictions placed on his activities. The children divided their time between the cottage and the ranch, increasingly comfortable in both settings as autumn deepened around them. 2 weeks after Luke's injury, the doctor finally cleared him for light duties around the ranch. Though far from fully healed, he could now move about without constant pain, his arm supported by a sling as his shoulder continued to mend. Hannah insisted on being present for this consultation, suspecting rightly that without supervision, Luke would interpret light duties as permission to return to his full workload. "You're lucky, young man," the elderly doctor told Luke sternly. "Another inch to the left and that bullet would have shattered your shoulder joint beyond repair. As it is, you'll have full use of your arm again, provided you don't strain it prematurely." Luke looked suitably chastened, especially under Hannah's watchful gaze. "I understand, doctor." "Light duties only for now. See that you do," the doctor said, packing away his instruments. "You have a good woman looking out for you. Best not disappoint her with foolishness." After the doctor departed, Luke turned to Hannah with a rueful smile. "He makes me feel like a schoolboy caught climbing trees against his mother's orders." Hannah laughed, arranging the sling more comfortably around his neck. "Because you act like one sometimes, all eagerness and no caution." Luke caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm that sent warmth cascading through her. "Not in all things. Some matters deserve patience and careful attention." His meaning was clear in the intensity of his gaze, and Hannah felt her cheeks flush. Their courtship, though progressing with the natural acceleration of frontier life, had been conducted with proper restraint out of respect for her position in the community and the presence of her children. Luke had been adamant about protecting her reputation, even as their feelings for each other deepened with each passing day. Now, standing in the privacy of his cabin with his recovery assured, Luke's eyes held a question Hannah had been anticipating. "Hannah," he began, still holding her hand, "I know we haven't known each other long by some standards, But out here, life doesn't wait for conventional timelines. He took a deep breath. I love you. I love your children. I want to build a life with all of you if you'll have me. Though she had suspected this was coming, Hannah's heart still raced at his words. Are you proposing, Lucas Remington? I am, he confirmed, his expression serious despite the smile tugging at his lips. Inelegantly, perhaps, without a ring or proper courtship behind us. But with every ounce of love in my heart. Hannah stepped closer, her free hand coming to rest against his cheek. I don't need elegance or convention, Luke, just honesty and love, both of which you've given in abundance. Is that a yes? He asked, hope brightening his eyes. It's a yes, Hannah whispered, but with one condition. Luke raised an eyebrow. Name it. I have 3 children depending on me, she said softly, echoing the warning she'd given him that first day, though now with entirely different meaning. They must always come first in our decisions, our plans. Luke's smile was radiant as he drew her gently into his arms, careful of his injured shoulder. Now they'll have 4 of us looking out for them, you, me, and Mr. and Mrs. Reeves, who are already plotting to spoil them rotten as honorary grandchildren. Hannah laughed, joy bubbling through her as Luke lowered his head to claim her lips in a kiss that sealed their promise to each other. When they finally parted, Luke rested his forehead against hers. When? He asked simply. Hannah considered. The school term ends December 15th for the Christmas holiday. Perhaps during that break, it would give us time to make arrangements and the children would be free from school responsibilities to adjust to the changes. Luke nodded, practical even in this most emotional of moments. The ranch is quieter in winter too. We could take some time together as a family before the spring work begins. Family. The word resonated through Hannah with sweet certainty. This man who had entered their lives so unexpectedly was already thinking of them as a unit, a whole. I should tell the children, Hannah said, though I suspect they've been anticipating this announcement for some time. Luke chuckled. Sarah asked me last week if my cabin could fit another bed for Thomas, since they'd likely be spending more time at the ranch after the wedding. Your daughter has an uncanny ability to see what's coming. She does indeed, Hannah agreed with a laugh. Shall we tell them together? The children's reaction to the news that evening exceeded even Hannah's expectations. Emma danced around the main house sitting room with delight, while Thomas bombarded Luke with questions about where they would live and if he could learn to ride a proper cowboy horse. Sarah, ever the practical one, immediately began listing the logistics that would need to be addressed, from moving their belongings to adjusting the teaching schedule. You've already thought about all this, haven't you? Hannah asked her daughter fondly. Sarah nodded, her expression serious beyond her years. Someone had to, Mama. You and Mr. Remington. Luke, he interrupted gently. If you're comfortable with that, now that we're to be family. Sarah considered this, then nodded. You and Luke have been so busy making eyes at each other that someone needed to consider the practical matters. Luke burst out laughing, then winced as the motion jarred his shoulder. She has you there, Hannah. We've been somewhat distracted. The announcement of their engagement was met with universal approval in Council Bluffs. The town had watched the romance develop with collective interest, many having suspected from the beginning that the handsome ranch foreman and the courageous new schoolteacher were destined for each other. Mayor Wilson was particularly pleased, seeing in their union a perfect solution to the educational needs of both the town and the outlying ranch community. The town council readily approved Hannah's proposal to split her teaching time between the 2 locations, with the Double R school reopening after the Christmas holiday. The wedding was set for December 22nd, allowing for a small honeymoon trip to Omaha before the start of the new term. As the date approached, Preparations absorbed much of Hannah's free time. Mrs. Douglas and other town ladies helped her create a new dress for the occasion, not the traditional white, which would have been impractical for a frontier wedding and inappropriate for a widow, but a deep blue silk that brought out the gold in her hazel eyes and complemented her chestnut hair. Luke, meanwhile, worked with Miguel and other ranch hands to expand his cabin into a proper family home. 2 additional bedrooms were constructed, along with a larger kitchen and living area. The work progressed quickly despite Luke's still healing shoulder, as every man at the Double R volunteered his labor to help create a suitable home for their respected foreman and his new family. Through these busy weeks, one shadow lingered at the edges of their happiness. Jesse Blackwell remained at large, though his gang had been significantly diminished by the arrests following the cattle raid. Blackwell himself had escaped into the hills. Sheriff Douglas maintained that with winter approaching, the outlaw would likely leave the territory until spring, seeking easier pickings elsewhere during the harsh months ahead. Luke wasn't convinced but kept his concerns to himself, not wanting to worry Hannah unnecessarily. He increased security at the ranch, ensuring that men rode in pairs when checking the outlying pastures, and quietly arranged for additional deputies to be present in town during school hours. If Blackwell harbored any thoughts of revenge, Luke was determined he would find no opportunity to act on them. The week before the wedding, Hannah and the children moved the last of their belongings from the cottage to the newly expanded cabin at the Double R. The town council had already arranged for a replacement teacher to occupy the cottage after the holidays, a young woman from Kansas City who would arrive in early January. Watching her children settle into their new rooms, Hannah felt a profound sense of rightness about the path they had taken. "Are you happy here, Sarah?" she asked her eldest as they arranged the girls' books on a shelf Luke had built specially for her. Sarah considered the question with her usual thoughtfulness. "Yes, Mama. It's different from Philadelphia in every way, but better, I think. I feel like I can breathe here, and Luke makes you happy. That makes me happy too." Hannah hugged her daughter close, marveling at her maturity. "You're quite remarkable, you know that. Not every 10-year-old would adapt so well to such changes." Sarah smiled, a rare, unguarded moment that reminded Hannah she was still a child despite her serious nature. "I like seeing you smile again, Mama. You didn't do that much in Philadelphia, even before Papa died." The observation struck Hannah deeply. Had her unhappiness been so evident, even to her children? Yet another reason to be grateful for the new life they'd found in Council Bluffs and for the man who had helped make it possible. 3 days before the wedding, a winter storm swept across the prairie, blanketing the landscape in pristine white. The Double Artiques main house, decorated for both Christmas and the upcoming nuptials, glowed with warmth and light against the snowy backdrop. Hannah stood at the window of the guest room she was occupying until the ceremony, watching the swirling flakes with a sense of peaceful anticipation. A knock at the door announced Luke, who entered with a steaming mug of hot chocolate. "Thought you might like something warm," he said, crossing the room to join her at the window. "The storms expected to pass by tomorrow should be clear for the wedding." Hannah accepted the mug gratefully, breathing in the rich chocolate scent. "It's beautiful, isn't it? I've never seen snow so expansive." In the city, it turned gray almost immediately. Luke nodded, his arms slipping around her waist as they gazed out at the transformed landscape. "First snowfall of winter always feels like a fresh start. Clean slate. Appropriate for a wedding," Hannah observed, leaning into his embrace. "Though I think we began our fresh start the day I stepped off that stage coach." Luke's lips brushed her temple, a touch of affection that had become wonderfully familiar. Best day of my life, though I didn't know it at the time. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the snow fall as twilight deepened around the ranch. In 3 days, they would be husband and wife, beginning a new chapter in lives that had already seen more than their share of hardship and loss. The knowledge filled Hannah with a quiet joy that needed no words to express. Later that evening, as the family gathered in the main house for dinner with Mr. and Mrs. Reeves, a rider arrived with news from town. Luke went to meet him, returning to the dining room with an expression Hannah had learned to recognize: controlled concern masked by outward calm. "What is it?" she asked as he resumed his seat. "Message from Sheriff Douglas," Luke replied, his voice casual for the children's benefit. "Nothing urgent. I'll need to ride into town tomorrow once the storm clears." Hannah wasn't fooled by his tone, but understood his reluctance to discuss the matter in front of the children. After dinner, when the younger ones were engaged in a game of checkers with Mr. Reeves, she pulled Luke aside in the hallway. "What did the sheriff really want?" she asked directly. Luke sighed, knowing better than to attempt evasion with Hannah. "Blackwell's been spotted near Council Bluffs. Sheriff's forming a posse to track him down before he can cause more trouble." Hannah's heart sank. "You're joining them?" It wasn't a question, but Luke nodded anyway. "Have to, Hannah. Blackwell's a danger to everyone in the county as long as he's free, and after our last encounter. He might hold a grudge." "The wedding is in 3 days," Hannah reminded him, trying to keep the worry from her voice. "Luke, if something happens to you—" Luke drew her into his arms, holding her close as if to reassure himself as much as her. "Nothing's going to happen. Sheriff Douglas has a solid lead on Blackwell's location. With luck, we'll have him in custody by nightfall tomorrow and back in time for final wedding preparations." Hannah wanted to protest further, to beg him not to go, but she knew it would be futile. This was who Luke was, a man who faced danger when necessary to protect those he cared about. It was part of why she loved him, even as it frightened her. "Promise me you'll be careful," she said instead, her hands gripping the front of his shirt. "No heroics." "Promise," Luke agreed, sealing the vow with a gentle kiss. "I've got too much to live for to take foolish risks." The following morning dawned clear and cold, the storm having blown itself out during the night. Luke was up before sunrise, preparing to ride into town. Hannah joined him in the kitchen, where Mrs. Flores was packing food for his journey. "The sheriff says the posse will meet at his office at noon." Luke told Hannah as he strapped on his gun belt, a sight that sent a chill through her, despite her understanding of its necessity. "Should be back by tomorrow evening at the latest." Hannah nodded, fighting to maintain a calm facade. "The children will be disappointed to miss saying goodbye." "Better this way," Luke said. "No need to worry them. As far as they're concerned, I'm just checking on wedding arrangements in town." Their farewell was brief but intense, Luke holding Hannah tightly before reluctantly mounting his horse. "I'll be back before you know it," he promised. Hannah watched him ride away, the rising sun casting his silhouette in sharp relief against the snow-covered landscape. Only when he had disappeared from view did she allow the tears to fall, quickly wiping them away before returning to the warmth of the house. The day passed with agonizing slowness. Hannah tried to focus on wedding preparations, finalizing the menu with Mrs. Flores, arranging the last details of her dress with Mrs. Reeves, but her thoughts continually returned to Luke and the danger he might be facing. The children, picking up on her tension despite her efforts to hide it, were unusually subdued, though they accepted without question the explanation that Luke had business in town. By evening, with no word from the posse, Hannah's anxiety had reached a fever pitch. She sat by the window in the main house sitting room, ostensibly reading but actually watching the road for any sign of riders. Mr. Reeves, understanding her worry, kept the children entertained with stories of the ranch's early days, allowing Hannah the space to maintain her vigil. It was near midnight, the children long since in bed, when the sound of horses approaching brought Hannah to her feet. Mr. Reeves joined her at the window, his weathered face concerned as they watched several riders emerge from the darkness. Luke was among them. Hannah noted with relief, but the grim set of his expression suggested the expedition had not gone as planned. She met him at the door, noting with alarm the exhaustion etched in his features and the blood staining his sleeve not his own. She quickly determined, as he moved without the stiffness of injury. "What happened?" she asked as he sank into a chair by the fire, accepting the whiskey Mr. Reeves pressed into his hand. "Blackwell got away," Luke said, his voice tight with frustration. "We tracked him to an abandoned cabin near the river. There was a firefight. 2 of his remaining men were killed, but Blackwell himself slipped away in the confusion." Hannah sat beside him, relief at his safe return warring with concern over the continuing threat. "Was anyone in the posse hurt?" Luke shook his head. "Minor injuries only." Sheriff took a graze to his arm, nothing serious. He drained the whiskey in one swallow, grimacing at the burn. "We searched until dark, but the trail went cold at the river. Sheriff's keeping men in town on alert, but—" he sighed heavily. "Blackwell could be anywhere by now." "What does this mean for us?" Hannah asked quietly. "For the wedding," Luke met her eyes directly. "Nothing changes, Hannah. I refuse to let a man like Blackwell dictate our lives. The wedding goes forward as planned with extra security in place. Sheriff Douglas has already arranged for deputies to be stationed at the church and along the roads between here and town." Hannah nodded, drawing strength from his determination. "Good. I have no intention of postponing our marriage because of that man." Luke's expression softened, his hand finding hers. "That's my girl, brave as always." Mrs. Reeves, who had been hovering in the doorway, stepped forward. "You need rest, both of you. Tomorrow's a busy day with final preparations." Luke didn't argue, evidence of his exhaustion. As they walked together to Hannah's room, he kept her hand firmly in his, as if reassuring himself of her presence. "I'm sorry I couldn't bring better news," he said quietly as they paused outside her door. Hannah touched his cheek, noting the dark shadows beneath his eyes. "You came back safely. That's what matters most." He leaned into her touch, his eyes closing briefly. "2 more days, Hannah, then you're stuck with me for good." "I can't wait," she whispered, rising on tiptoes to press a gentle kiss to his lips before reluctantly stepping back. "Now get some sleep. I need you well rested for our wedding day." The day before the wedding passed in a whirlwind of activity. Final decorations were hung in the double Artiques main house, where the reception would be held after the ceremony at Council Bluff's small church. Hannah's dress underwent last-minute adjustments under Mrs. Reeves' expert hands, while Luke and the ranch hands prepared the yard for the arrival of guests, despite the snow that still blanketed the ground. Security was visibly increased around the property, with armed men patrolling the perimeter. Luke had explained the situation to Mr. Reeves, who fully supported the precautions while ensuring they remained subtle enough not to alarm the wedding guests or children. By evening, everything was ready. A small rehearsal dinner was held at the main house, attended by the immediate wedding party. Mr. Reeves would give Hannah away, while Miguel would serve as Luke's best man. Sarah would be her mother's attendant, with Emma as flower girl and Thomas proudly carrying the rings. As the dinner concluded and the children were sent to bed, Luke pulled Hannah aside for a private moment in Mr. Reeves' study. "I have something for you," he said, producing a small wooden box from his pocket. A tradition I wanted to honor, even if we've done things in our own order. Hannah opened the box to find a delicate gold ring nestled inside, a single perfect diamond catching the lamplight. "Luke, it's beautiful," she breathed, touched by the gesture. "It was my mother's," Luke explained as he slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit. "The one piece of jewelry I kept when I left Virginia. She would have liked you, Hannah. Your strength, your devotion to your children." Hannah touched the ring reverently, understanding the significance of this gift from a man who carried so few material connections to his past. "I'll treasure it always." Luke kissed her then, a kiss full of promise and longing that left them both breathless. "Tomorrow," he murmured against her lips, "you become my wife." "Tomorrow," Hannah agreed, her heart full to bursting with love for this man who had changed her life so completely in just a few short months. Their wedding day dawned crisp and clear, the December sun casting diamond-like sparkles across the snow-covered landscape. Hannah woke early, a mixture of excitement and serene certainty filling her as she gazed out at the day that would see her become Mrs. Lucas Remington. Sarah helped her dress, the girl's careful hands arranging Hannah's hair in an elegant style adorned with small white flowers. Mrs. Reeves and Mrs. Douglas arrived to assist with the final preparations, their experienced hands making quick work of the dress's many buttons. "You look beautiful, Mama," Sarah said softly as Hannah stood before the mirror, the deep blue silk of her wedding dress complementing her fair complexion and bringing out the warm highlights in her chestnut hair. "Thank you, sweetheart," Hannah replied, drawing her daughter into a gentle embrace. "Are you truly happy about today, about becoming a family with Luke?" Sarah nodded, her young face solemn yet content. "He makes you happy, he's good to us. And—" She hesitated, then continued with the directness Hannah had come to cherish. "I think Papa would want this for us. A fresh start with someone who truly cares." Hannah blinked back tears at her daughter's words, unwilling to spoil Mrs. Reeves' careful work on her face. "When did you get so wise, my Sarah?" Before Sarah could respond, Emma burst into the room in her white flower girl dress, twirling to make the skirt flare. "Mama, you look like a princess from my storybook," Hannah laughed, the moment of emotion shifting to joy at her youngest child's enthusiasm. "Thank you, Emma. And you look like a perfect fairy princess yourself." Thomas appeared in the doorway, uncomfortable but proud in his new suit, his hair slicked down in an unsuccessful attempt to tame its natural cowlick. "The wagons are ready, Mama. Mr. Reeves says it's time to go to the church." The journey to Council Bluffs was made in a small procession of wagons, the wedding party accompanied by several armed ranch hands whose presence was explained to the children as an honor guard. Hannah, riding with Mrs. Reeves and her daughters, felt a flutter of nerves as the church came into view, its simple white steeple rising against the winter sky. Luke had gone ahead earlier with Miguel and Thomas, following tradition by not seeing his bride before the ceremony. Sheriff Douglas met their wagon as it arrived, his badge polished to a shine, though Hannah didn't miss the holstered gun partially hidden beneath his formal jacket. "Everything's secure, Mrs. Kirkwood," he assured her quietly as he helped her down from the wagon. "Deputies are stationed throughout town. Your day won't be disturbed." Hannah nodded gratefully, pushing thoughts of Blackwell from her mind as she focused on the joy of the occasion. The church was filled with townspeople and ranch hands, all dressed in their Sunday best despite the December cold. Christmas greenery decorated the modest sanctuary, pine boughs and red ribbons creating a festive atmosphere for the season and the celebration. As the small organ began to play, Hannah took Mr. Reeves' arm, her heart pounding with anticipation. Emma proceeded down the aisle first, solemnly dropping flower petals with each step, followed by Sarah, who carried a small bouquet matching Hannah's larger one of winter greenery and dried flowers. Then it was Hannah's turn. As she stepped into the sanctuary on Mr. Reeves' arm, her eyes found Luke immediately. He stood tall and handsome at the altar, his dark hair neatly combed, dressed in a new black suit that emphasized his broad shoulders. The expression on his face as he saw her, a mixture of awe, love, and profound joy, brought tears to Hannah's eyes. The ceremony itself was a blur of emotion. Hannah was aware of the minister's words, of the responses she and Luke gave, of Thomas proudly presenting the rings at the appropriate moment. But most of all, she was aware of Luke's hands holding hers, his eyes never leaving her face as they spoke the vows that would bind them together as husband and wife. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the minister declared at last. "Mr. Remington, you may kiss your bride." Luke's kiss was gentle yet full of promise, appropriate for the church setting while conveying the depth of his feelings. As they turned to face their friends and family, now officially introduced as Mr. and Mrs. Lucas Remington, Hannah felt a sense of completion she had never expected to find again after the disappointments of her first marriage. The reception at the Double R was a joyous affair, with food, music, and dancing lasting well into the evening. Hannah moved through the celebration in a happy daze, accepting congratulations from townspeople and ranch hands alike, always aware of Luke's presence nearby, his hand finding hers whenever they came together in the crowd. As the party continued, Luke led Hannah outside for a moment of quiet on the porch. The winter night was clear and cold, stars brilliant in the black sky above the snow-covered ranch yard. "Happy, Mrs. Remington?" Luke asked softly, his arm around her waist as they gazed up at the stars. "Completely," Hannah affirmed, leaning into his embrace. "Though I think it may take some time to get used to my new name." "We have a lifetime for that," Luke replied, turning her gently to face him. "A lifetime I never thought I'd have again, until you stepped off that stagecoach with 3 children and more courage than anyone I'd ever met." Hannah reached up to touch his face, marveling that this man was now her husband. "I came west seeking security for my children. I found that and so much more." Luke kissed her then, a deeper, more passionate kiss than the one they had shared in the church, a husband's kiss, full of love and promise and a future neither had dared to imagine just months before. Their moment alone was interrupted by the sound of the door opening behind them. They turned to find all 3 children standing there, Sarah with her usual knowing smile, Thomas trying to look grown up, and Emma barely containing her excitement. "Mr. Reeves says it's time to cut the cake," Sarah announced, "and Emma's afraid all the frosting roses will be gone if you don't come soon." Luke laughed, extending his hand to Emma, who took it immediately. "Well, we can't have that, can we? Let's go save those frosting roses." With his other arm still around Hannah's waist, and Thomas and Sarah falling into step beside them, they re-entered the house as a family, not just Hannah and her 3 children, but 4 of them now, bound together by love that had blossomed in the most unexpected of circumstances. 3 months later, as spring began to touch the prairie with green, Hannah stood on the porch of their cabin, watching as Luke taught Thomas how to properly saddle a pony. The boy's face was alight with concentration and pride as he followed Luke's patient instructions, eager to please the man who had become the father he barely remembered having. Nearby, Sarah sat on a bench with a book, occasionally glancing up to observe her brother's progress, while Emma gathered the first wildflowers of the season under the watchful eye of Mrs. Flores, who had come to deliver fresh bread and stayed to visit. The Double R Ranch School had opened successfully after the Christmas holiday, with Hannah teaching there 3 days a week and in Council Bluffs the other 2. The arrangement had worked better than anyone anticipated, allowing her to balance her professional responsibilities with her new family life. Winter had passed peacefully, with no further sign of Jesse Blackwell in the territory. Sheriff Douglas believed the outlaw had moved on to easier targets, perhaps further west where law enforcement was more scattered. Though Luke maintained reasonable precautions around the ranch, the shadow of Blackwell's threat had gradually receded from their daily consciousness. Life had settled into a rhythm that suited them all: busy, sometimes chaotic with 3 active children, but deeply satisfying. Luke had proven to be the partner Hannah had always wished for, supportive of her teaching career, loving with her children, and bringing a warmth to their home that had been missing for too long. As Hannah watched her family, her hand unconsciously moved to rest on her stomach, where the first subtle signs of new life had recently made themselves known. She hadn't told Luke yet, wanting to be certain before sharing news that would change their family yet again. But the doctor in Council Bluffs had confirmed her suspicions just yesterday. Come fall, there would be a 4th child in their household. Luke looked up then, as if sensing her thoughts, and their eyes met across the yard. His smile, that transformation of his serious face that still made her heart skip, told her everything she needed to know about his happiness. He said something to Thomas, then crossed the yard to join her on the porch. "What are you thinking about so intently, Mrs. Remington?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind as they watched the children. Hannah leaned back against him, enjoying the solid strength of his chest. "About how much has changed in 7 months. When I stepped off that stagecoach in Council Bluffs, I never imagined finding this kind of happiness." Luke's lips brushed her temple, a gesture of affection that had become wonderfully familiar. "Best day of my life, even if I didn't know it at the time." Hannah turned in his arms, looking up into the face she had come to love beyond measure. "I have something to tell you," she said softly, "something important." Luke's expression grew serious, concern touching his eyes. "What is it?" Hannah took his hand and placed it gently over her stomach, still flat but harboring their shared future. "Come October, our family will grow by 1 more." For a moment, Luke simply stared at her, his expression shifting from confusion to dawning understanding to pure, unadulterated joy. "A baby." "We're having a baby," Hannah nodded, tears of happiness filling her eyes at his reaction. "Yes, our baby." Luke let out a whoop that startled the children and Mrs. Flores, then swept Hannah into a careful but exuberant embrace. "Hannah Remington, you are a constant wonder," he murmured against her hair. "Just when I think I couldn't possibly be happier, you prove me wrong." "Are you truly pleased?" Hannah asked, though his reaction left little doubt. "It's sooner than we planned, and with the children and the schools," Luke silenced her with a gentle kiss. "I am beyond pleased. I am ecstatic. Everything else we'll figure out together, as we always do." The children, curious about the commotion, had gathered at the bottom of the porch steps. Luke turned to them, his arm still around Hannah's waist. "Your mother and I have some news," he announced, his voice resonating with pride and joy. "Come October, you'll have a new brother or sister to welcome to our family." Emma's squeal of delight was immediate, while Thomas's eyes widened with excitement. Sarah, ever observant, smiled knowingly. She'd likely suspected already, Hannah realized. "I told Emma we needed more people," Thomas declared importantly. "She said 3 children was enough, but I said more is better." Luke laughed, ruffling the boy's hair affectionately. "Very wise, son. In this case, more is indeed better." As the children peppered them with questions: "Where will the baby sleep? Can I help name it? Will it be a boy or girl? Hannah exchanged a glance with Luke, their shared happiness needing no words. From reluctant beginnings, a widow with 3 children depending on her, a lonely ranch foreman haunted by his past, they had built something neither had dared to hope for. A future filled with love, purpose, and family. That evening, as twilight settled over the prairie and the children played a quiet game before bedtime, Hannah and Luke sat together on the porch swing Luke had built over the winter. His hand rested protectively over her stomach, though there was nothing yet to feel. "I was thinking about what you said when we first met," Luke said thoughtfully, "about having 3 children depending on you." Hannah smiled at the memory. "And your response that now they'd have 4 of us. Little did we know how prophetic those words would be." Luke nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Life has a way of giving us what we need, even when it's not what we thought we were looking for. I came west running from memories, only to find a future I never imagined possible. You came seeking security for your children and found a partner to share your journey. And now there will be 7 of us altogether," Hannah said, leaning her head against his shoulder. "A true family, built from loss and hope and love." Luke's arm tightened around her, his voice soft in the gathering darkness. "Our family, our home, our future together, whatever it may bring." As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Hannah Remington closed her eyes, content in the knowledge that the journey that had begun in uncertainty 7 months ago had led her exactly where she was meant to be, in the arms of the man she loved, surrounded by the family they had forged together on the wild frontier of their hearts.